this week's episode of Seraph of the End. Yu and Kimizuki literally battle their inner demons so that they can take control of their cursed weapons. This week's episode also has the very first intro for the second season, and it's okay. Dare I say it, Season 2 of Seraph of the End might be a little bit better than the first. So far, the first two episodes have been infinitely more entertaining, but still nothing too mind-blowing. This episode right here, though, is very simple, and it actually has some really cool animated action scenes when we get to see the main characters using their cursed weapons, which can manifest themselves as these giant, fiery-looking demons with lots of cool designs. There's also a little bit of tension in this episode between the vampires. You have the character of Farad, who seems like he's trying to conspire against Cruel Tepes. We also get to see some of the other leaders of this big vampire organization. This other chibi-eyes looking one, which has this top hat, which seems to have a bad relationship with Cruel Tepes. I believe the name of that vampire was Lest Kerr. This predictably, of course, pisses off Cruel to the point where she literally destroys a large chunk of the floor and won't even look at Mikaela. Honestly, I wish we had more Cruel Tepes in these episodes. She's a pretty awesome character. But yeah, this week's episode is pretty simple. It's basically just Yu and his friends going outside the walls so that they can train to use their weapons. They're going outside the walls because if they go all berserk, this way they won't hurt anybody. They also need to worry about being outside because they have to worry about those big giant monsters known as the Four Horsemen of John. But luckily, Yoichi is there to take them out, which might be one of the most surprising scenes of this episode for me personally, because Yoichi just continues to be, to me, honestly, the most badass character of the show. I know that seems weird because he's basically like the punching bag of the group, but every single time they go into like a battle situation, he always ends up surprising me, and in this episode he actually summons his inner demon, which takes the form of this giant green bird. It has the ability to turn itself into these multiple arrows which fire in different directions, kind of like homing missiles, and it just takes out these monsters like it's nobody's business. The scene is very well animated too, especially when you get to see the arrows actually flying through the city. More of this, please. Yu and Kimizuki actually fighting against their demons is really interesting. It's kind of what we've seen before, but we do get some new flashbacks from this. So, basically they go inside like their own mind or body, and they're actually talking to their demon and fighting against them. And we get this one flashback with Yu, where apparently his family tried to kill him. His original family. And this has something to do with these experiments which were done with the Seraph of the End, whatever the hell that is, and they considered Yu a devil child. Imagine if your parents were calling you that and then walked slowly towards you with a giant butcher knife. You'd be pretty freaked out too and probably have a pretty messed up childhood. And that's what happens. He starts to run out and then he sees all his dead friends all over the floor. That's when all of his collective memories finally start to sort of meld together. And that's when he realizes, wait a minute, no, this is not what I have planned. I'm going to save my friend Mikaela and I'm going to become best friends with that demon over there because I need its power to save him. It's pretty weird how basically he just becomes all buddy-buddy with Ashiramaru. I mean, they might as well just have a sleepover, get some pizza, and play Nintendo. And it is very stereotypical how he promises Ashiramaru to actually be its friend. It's very, very strange. And I say it only because the inner demons appear to be completely genderless. They could be male or they could be female. In my opinion, though, I think that Kimizuki's story is the more interesting of the two, and it's definitely the more disturbing, because we get to learn that in the past when he was taking care of his sister, he was actually traveling with a group of his young friends, and they were running low on supplies, so they have to move to somewhere else. The problem is, Kimizuki's sister, who is on her deathbed, essentially, is going to be dead weight, so they decide that they're going to make Kimizuki kill her. But he's not going to do that, so they decide that they're going to do it for him, so he has to run into his apartment, barricade it off, and that's, of course, when the demon starts taking control of his sister, which is really all just going on in his mind, where he's basically begging for Kimizuki to actually end up killing his sister, but he's not going to do that. He's already established this very early on, so he gets to fight against his demon, ending it with one slash. We don't get to see them interacting with that much, which I think is a disappointment, because I think this is the first time in the series we've actually seen what his inner demon looked like, which is basically very similar to Ashiramaru, where it's this, like, weird, genderless, chibi-eyed, cute demon thing, which just seems to be incredibly powerful and wants to suck your blood like a vampire. But the best part about this week's episode, without a doubt in my humble opinion, at the very end of the episode, when both Yu and Kimizuki finally have mastered their weapons, they decide to test them out. And we finally get to see some brand new abilities from both of them. First, Yu. He's able to summon these multiple swords which float around his body, which are all connected by this red demonic energy. It almost looks like a giant fan, or almost like peacock feathers, except with swords. It looks really damn awesome. He's able to fire them in multiple directions, but that's about as much as we get to see from that technique. But not to be outdone, Kimizuki also has this ability to summon this giant coffin covered in purple energy, which has something inside of it. It doesn't really reveal what it's going to do. I have no idea what the power is going to be, but it looks freaking metal. So what's the rundown on this week's episode of Seraph of the End, Vampire Reign, Battle in Nagoya? A series that needs a much shorter title. This one's pretty good right here. Again, just like the rest of the series, nothing groundbreaking, but entertaining as freaking hell. Just the action scenes in the series continue to outdo themselves, which is something that I think is really good, especially that opening scene with Yoichi, where he was firing his arrows. The way they actually did that big camera sweep across the city as the arrows are flying through all the different buildings and then colliding with all the different monsters looked really damned impressive. Not to mention the actual bird demon that actually erupted from his body. Definitely one of the coolest looking scenes I've seen from the series. But again, this was a very simple episode, which was very similar to some of the ones we've seen before, where they're challenging their inner demons. We get to see a lot of some of the stuff we've seen before, but we were also given privilege to see some brand new flashbacks, which do flesh out the characters a little bit more, and make you sympathize for their cause just a little bit. As case in point, Yu. I mean, I had no idea that his parents were going to try and stab him to death, because they felt he was like frickin' Damien from The Omen. That's pretty freaky. And then you got Kimizuki, like, the whole, like, story with his friends, like, having to decide they're gonna have to kill his sister, is very disturbing, and could potentially happen in a post-apocalyptic setting, so it's actually slightly realistic as well. And then, of course, you had Cruel Tepes, Mikaela, and Farid. That whole little bit was very short, but very sweet. I like how they don't really go to the vampires that much. It makes them seem all the more, mysterious, especially as we continue to learn a little bit more about how their society works, how they have, like, all of these other vampires around the world who are ruling, like, different sectors. It kind of gives me the vibes of Evangelion when you have all of the higher-ups talking to each other, where basically it's just like this big circular room. You don't see their faces unless they somehow chime themselves in. It's pretty interesting. The good thing about this episode is that it is going to make Yu's team come closer together, thus they're going to be a much stronger force as they fight against all of the vampires. But let's talk about the intro. There is a brand new intro for this series, and I don't really like this song. To me, it just sounds kind of like your typical generic anime opening. Like, this seems like they could have inserted this in any other show, and it probably could have worked. Then again, I'm not really sure what it's translating out to. I just have to say that I liked the intro from the first series better. I liked the song, and I liked the imagery. That being said, all of the action that's in this intro looks really great, and if they can make the actual series look like that, then sign me up. The outro, again, I'm just very indifferent to. There's only so many outros I've seen in anime series that really grip me. Unfortunately, this is not one of them. But if anything, it does have some nice imagery showing off some of the characters in situations that we'll probably never see in the regular anime series. That being said, this was a pretty good episode right here with some really nice animation, some good attention to detail when it came to the artwork, some pretty heavy themes, learning a little bit more about the characters and their backstories, learning to use their weapons, seeing them use them for the first time, and more of all of the conspiring that is going on in the vampire society. So this was a pretty decent episode, a very entertaining episode of Seraph of the End. Again, nothing groundbreaking, but still a pretty fun show. I have to admit, I liked this one, so I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. Check it out, Seraph of the End fans. You might see something you like. But before you guys leave today, I would love to hear your thoughts about this week's episode of Seraph of the End, and you can tell me in the comment section below. What did you think of the brand new weapon abilities from Yu and Kimizuki? What do you think they're really going to be able to do? What was in that coffin the entire time? Is he going to summon some sort of monster? Is it going to fire lasers out of its eyes? What the hell is it going to do? And what do you want to see from the rest of Seraph of the End? Please tell me in the comment section below. Thank you guys for watching my review. Make sure to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. We'd really appreciate it. So thank you guys again for watching, and as always, stay dandy, baby!